the weight of a feather. There was a saying in the old village of Ashenvale, stitched into sampler cloths and carved above hearths: "The lock does not care who holds the key." Wren Calloway had heard it first from her mother, who had pressed a small iron key into her palm the day she died, not to any door, not to any chest, but simply as a thing to hold. A reminder that worth was not announced. It was simply true. Wren was 17 then. By 22 she was scrubbing floors in the Alpha King's palace at Duskspire, and she had never let go of that key. Chapter 1. The Palace of Impossible Things. Duskspire was exactly what its name suggested, a place where the light never quite finished arriving. The palace rose from a granite promontory above the Ashenvale Valley. Its towers stained the perpetual amber gray of a sun that could not decide whether to set. Inside, everything was marble and cedar, and the particular kind of hush that money manufactures. Wren had worked the lower corridors for 3 years. She knew which flagstones groaned, which sconces dripped tallow onto the good rugs, which pantry door had to be lifted slightly at the hinge before it would open. She knew the palace the way you only know a place by moving through it invisibly, with her knees, her palms, her nose close to the baseboards. She did not have a wolf. This was the fact that defined her in every room she entered. In the Shifter Kingdoms, a woman without her animal half was categorized somewhere between unfortunate and irrelevant. The other maids were sympathetic in the way people are sympathetic to a broken umbrella. They wished it were otherwise, but there was nothing to be done, and you certainly couldn't take it out in real weather. Wren had stopped feeling sorry for herself about it years ago. She had other things. She had her mother's key, worn on a cord around her neck, tucked beneath her gray uniform dress. She had a mind like still water. When everyone else stirred in agitation, she went quiet, and in the quiet she could see what was at the bottom. And she had Sable, the head housekeeper, who had hired her when no one else would, and who said things like, "Stop apologizing with your posture, girl. You're taking up exactly the right amount of space." Today, however, Duskspire was in crisis. Chapter 2. 25 Experts and a Silence. The cause of the crisis occupied the king's great hall. A chest. Not a spectacular chest by appearance. It was perhaps 2 feet wide, carved from a wood so dark it seemed to absorb the torchlight. Silver fittings at each corner. A lock at the front that bore no keyhole, no dial, no visible mechanism whatsoever. Just a smooth, unbroken face of black iron etched with a symbol no one could identify. Inside the chest, according to palace record and royal treaty, was the covenant seal of the 3 valleys, a document of binding law that needed to be produced in 4 days' time to ratify a peace accord that had been 2 decades in the making. The accord would end a territorial conflict that had killed 3 generations of border families in the eastern reaches. The chest had arrived 3 weeks ago from the estate of the late Lord Ashenmere, whose family had held the seal in trust. No key had come with it, no instruction. Lord Ashenmere, being thoroughly dead, was not available for comment. For 3 weeks experts had been arriving. Wren had cleaned up after every one of them. She had swept up iron filings from the Locksmith Guild of Crestfall. She had mopped a peculiar silvery residue left by an alchemist from the academies of the Thornback Mountains. She had gathered the scattered notes of 3 archivists, 2 historians, a runecaster, a seer who smelled strongly of rosemary, and an assortment of wolf-shifter trackers who had been brought in because, and this had been explained to Wren very seriously by the 3rd-floor steward, wolf senses might detect some hidden mechanism that human fingers could not. They had all pressed their noses against the chest, one after another, and said variations of "there is nothing to find." In total, 25 experts, 25 failures. The king had stopped attending the demonstration sessions by expert number 18. He attended today because his council had told him, with considerable diplomatic throat-clearing, that this was the last attempt before they would have to inform the other valleys that the Covenant seal was inaccessible, which would almost certainly collapse the accord, which would almost certainly restart the war. Wren knew this because she heard things. She was the landscape. No one moderated their conversations for the maid. She was polishing the wainscoting at the far end of the great hall when the 25th expert, a very tall, angular man in formal robes who claimed mastery of pre-Ashenvale binding enchantments, worked at the chest for 40 minutes, announced that it was fundamentally impenetrable by any known method, bowed, and withdrew. The hall went very quiet. Wren had seen the chest every day for 3 weeks. She had dusted it. She had thought about it, the way she thought about sticking pantry doors, the way she thought about anything that was supposed to do one thing and was stubbornly doing another. She knew something none of the 25 experts knew. She was trying to decide whether to say so, and what it would cost her, when the Alpha King spoke. Chapter 3. The Alpha King. His name was Calder Voss, and he was, by every outward measure, a man accustomed to being answered. He stood at the far end of the council table, one hand resting on it as the last expert departed, and said nothing for a long moment. He was tall, taller than Wren had understood from glimpsing him at distances, with the particular contained authority of a man who had never needed to raise his voice to fill a room. Dark hair, close cut. A jaw that looked like it had been appointed to its position by committee. Amber eyes that were, at present, flat with controlled frustration. He was a full wolf-shifter. Wren could tell by the way he held himself, that slight readiness in the shoulders, the awareness of the room as a spatial problem, the instinct always on a low simmer. His wolf was reputedly enormous, silver-gray, and had once held a mountain pass alone for 6 hours during the border conflict. Wren had served him tea twice at council breakfasts. He had not looked at her either time. She was looking at him now, which was already too much. His council was talking, Lord Pemberry, the eldest, suggesting emissaries be sent to request an extension. Lady Corvin, the youngest, suggesting perhaps a controlled destruction of the chest, though she qualified this with purely as a final option. Calder let them talk. He was staring at the chest. His eyes moved to Wren. Not a recognition. Just the reflex of a predator registering movement in his peripheral vision. She had stopped polishing. That was the movement. She should have kept polishing. You. The word was quiet. A stone dropped rather than thrown. Have you been in this hall before? The council stopped talking. Every face turned. Wren set down her cloth. She straightened to her full height, which was not impressive, but was, she reminded herself, exactly the right amount of space. Every day for 3 weeks, Your Majesty. I clean this corridor. Chapter 4. What Wren knew. The silence stretched. Lord Pemberry looked pained. Lady Corvin looked curious. Calder's eyes did not leave Wren's face. You have something to say about the chest. It was not a question. He had a tracker's instinct, evidently, for things that were trying not to be noticed. I might. She kept her voice level. It may be nothing. 25 people just gave me something. His tone was dry as winter gravel. None of it was useful. A maid's nothing is as good a place to start as any. There was a ripple of discomfort through the council. Wren heard it. She chose to ignore it the same way she ignored sleet. The wood is Ashenvale cedar, she said. The dark kind, from the old-growth valley floor. My mother's family harvested it for 3 generations. It doesn't just absorb light, it absorbs resonance. Sound, vibration, magical frequency. It's why none of the enchanters could read the lock. The chest itself is swallowing everything they send at it. Calder was very still. The archivists would have known that. They knew Ashenvale cedar existed, but they came from outside the valley. I grew up with it. My mother made me knock on it, in our furniture, before I was allowed to sit, to hear the difference. It has a distinct knock when it's hollow, and a distinct knock when it's... She stopped herself. When it's what? When something is loose inside it. The stillness in the room sharpened. Wren walked to the chest. No one stopped her. The council was too surprised to manage it. She crouched in front of it, the way she had dozens of times with her dustcloth, and she pressed her ear against the carved side panel. This is what I know. The chest doesn't have one lock. It has a sequence. She tapped the left corner, then the right corner, then the base of the carved symbol on the front, 3 distinct places, patient and measured. The cedar rings. If you know the hollow tones, you can hear that each of these points conceals a separate mechanism. The symbol on the front isn't a lock face. It's a sequence indicator. These 3 marks, she traced them with her fingertip, are in the old Ashenvale counting script. 1, 2, 3. You activate them in that order, by pressure, at the same time. She pressed her left thumb against the left corner silver fitting, her right thumb against the right corner fitting, and with the middle finger of her right hand, she pressed the center mark of the etched symbol. There was a sound like a long, slow exhale. The chest opened. The hall was absolutely silent. Wren stood. She stepped back. She folded her hands at her waist. Her heart was pounding in a way she absolutely refused to let anyone see. Calder Voss walked past his entire council to the chest. He looked inside. He looked at Wren. The flatness was gone from his eyes. Chapter 5. The Reckoning of the Council. The Covenant seal was intact. It was beautiful, a great disk of hammered silver, engraved with the pledges of the 3 valleys, the wax medallions of 3 ruling families still hanging from their ribbons, perfect and preserved. The council broke into noise. Lord Pembury was congratulatory, then immediately political, already reframing the success as a testament to the king's persistence in seeking counsel. Lady Corvin was simply looking at Wren with open admiration. Wren was trying to quietly gather her cleaning cloth and leave. Stay. She stilled, the king's voice again. She turned. The council quieted. Calder had the seal in his hands. He set it on the council table with enormous care and turned his full attention to her, and Wren understood, in a physical, immediate way, why people found it difficult to stand under his gaze. It was not hostile. It was simply complete. He did not look at half of a person. Your name? Wren Calloway, Your Majesty. 3rd floor corridor staff. How long have you been here? 3 years. Something moved across his face. Not guilt. Not yet. She would learn later that Calder Voss rarely moved quickly to guilt. He moved to questions first. Your family is from the valley? Original Ashenvale? My mother's family, yes. She passed when I was 17. I came to Duskspire for the work. You have no wolf. She met his eyes without flinching. I do not. The placement council would have assigned you to housekeeping. She said it plainly, not bitterly. Yes. Lord Pembury cleared his throat in a way that was clearly meant to conclude the exchange. Your Majesty, we should prepare the seal for transit. Pembury. Just the name. Pembury went quiet. Calder looked back at Wren. Why didn't you say something sooner? It was the question she had been preparing for since the moment she pressed those 3 points. I am a wolfless maid, Your Majesty. I had no standing to interrupt 25 credentialed experts. She paused. And honestly, I was not entirely certain I was right until the last expert left. I needed to see all the other approaches fail before I was sure none of them would work. But you knew about the cedar properties when they were still trying. Knowing something and being listened to are different privileges. She said it without heat. It was simply the truth of her life, worn smooth with use. Calder Voss looked at her for a long time. Then he looked at his counsel. Then he looked at the open chest, the seal on the table, and back at Wren. You will be at dinner this evening, he said. Not to serve, to sit. Chapter 6. A Seat at the Table. Wren spent the hours between the great hall and the evening meal in a state of careful private turbulence. Sable found her in the linen room, sitting on a crate doing nothing, which was alarming enough that Sable sat beside her without being asked. Wren told her everything. Sable listened with the focused attention of a woman who had spent 40 years watching the powerful underestimate the competent, and when Wren finished, Sable said, Well, about time. What if it's just for the evening? What if he wants to thank me publicly and then you will have sat at a king's table, and you will know your own worth regardless of what he decides to do with his. Sable smoothed the apron from her lap with business-like affection. The lock does not care who holds the key, Wren. You solved it. That belongs to you, whether he acknowledges it or not. The dinner was in the smaller private hall. Only the council, which meant Lord Pembury spent the first course speaking over Wren to Calder as though she were a centerpiece, and Lady Corvin, who sat beside her, spent the first course asking genuine questions about Ashenvale Cedar in a low, interested voice. Calder said little during the meal. He watched, which Wren had begun to understand was how he processed. After the second course, Pembury suggested that the palace might appropriately compensate Wren with a sum commensurate with a consultant's fee, given the extraordinary nature of the circumstances, and that she might be moved to a slightly preferable corridor assignment. Wren looked at her plate. Calder set down his fork. "No," he said, and the word rearranged the whole room. Pembury blinked. "Your Majesty? That isn't what we're doing." His amber eyes moved to Wren. "Miss Calloway, what would you want if I were asking properly?" Wren lifted her head. She thought about her mother's key. She thought about 3 years of invisible competence in gray hallways. She thought about the word properly and what it meant coming from a king. "I would want my knowledge used," she said. "Not paid for and dismissed. I know this valley, its history, its materials, its old scripts. I have been in every room of this palace. I know what is wrong with it and what is right with it. I would want a position where that knowledge matters." "What position would that be?" "I don't know that there is one." She held his gaze. But you could make one." Chapter 7. What Grows in Quiet Places. In the days that followed, Wren was assigned, officially on paper, with a title that had to be invented by the palace secretary, as Keeper of House Knowledge. It was an old position that had existed in the valley's original governance structure and been abandoned 2 centuries ago. Sable, reviewing the appointment document with the expression of a woman doing her best not to weep, said it was the most sensible thing the palace had done in living memory. Calder Voss, Wren was discovering, moved at 2 speeds. The speed of a king, which was administrative and decisive, and the speed of his wolf, which was patient and precise and extremely alert. He began finding reasons to walk the corridors she inventoried. At first she thought they were accidents. Then she noticed the accidents were too regular. He did not make flattering speeches. He asked questions. He asked about the eastern wall damp she had logged 3 times in the maintenance records that no one had acted on. He asked about the archive rooms on the 4th floor, where she had catalogued documents that no archivist had touched in decades, and found references to pre-accord border agreements that were suddenly, in light of the current treaty, quite relevant. He asked about the old Ashenvale counting script, and sat across from her at a work table while she taught him the symbols, and he was a fast learner, which she found quietly, and then less quietly admirable. Their bond arrived the way bonds arrive in the valley. Not with thunder, as the stories sometimes claimed, but with recognition. It happened on a Tuesday, mid-morning, over the archive documents. She had been explaining a land reference, and she looked up to find him not looking at the document at all, looking at her, and the look was the most absolute thing she had ever been on the receiving end of. Her wolf rose. That was the other thing. The wolf that everyone, placement council, other maids, every mirror in her head, had declared absent, dormant, perhaps never to arrive, surfaced in her chest like a swimmer breaking water after a very long time submerged. Small, but certain. White, in her mind's eye. Sure of itself in the way small things are when they are not afraid. Calder went very still. "You have a wolf," he said. "I seem to." Her voice was not entirely steady. "A late rise." He said it without surprise, without the condescension she had braced for. "Some wolves wait for the right conditions." "What conditions?" He held her gaze, and the amber in his eyes had gone warm and particular. Being in the right place. Being seen clearly. The bond settled between them then, quiet as the cedar chest opening. Not explosive, but inevitable. A thing that had been waiting for the right pressure in the right sequence. Chapter 8. The Weight of a Crown. It was not, of course, simple. Calder's council had questions. Lord Pembury had serious reservations delivered across approximately 4 separate meetings, concerning lineage, standing, the wolfless history, the servant history, the general optics of an alpha king bonding with a maid. He delivered these reservations in long paragraphs that used the word appropriate so many times that Wren eventually wrote account of it on the margin of a document and showed it to Lady Corvin, who pressed her lips together very hard. Calder let Pembury speak. He was, Wren had learned, genuinely respectful of his counsel's right to counsel, but his willingness to listen ended exactly at the border of what was his to decide. He sat at the head of the table and waited for Pembury to finish, and when Pembury finished, he said, "The Covenant seal ratifies in 2 days. The accord is intact. The border families in the eastern reaches will not bury another generation of their children in this conflict. That outcome belongs to Miss Calloway's knowledge, which 3 years of palace residency left entirely untapped because she had the wrong kind of birth circumstances. He let that sit. I would like to not make the same mistake for the next 50 years. Pembury tried once more. But, Your Majesty, the bond, Calder said with perfect calm, is not a matter for council vote. Wren, who was sitting in the chair to his left, she had been seated there since the chest morning, and it had gradually ceased to surprise anyone, looked at the table, then at the wall, then at her hands. Then she looked at Calder. He was looking at her, that complete look, the one that did not look at half of a person. She felt the small white wolf in her chest settle into something that was not uncertainty at all. After the meeting, in the corridor outside the council chamber, Calder walked beside her, not ahead, not behind, and said, "The ratification ceremony is in 2 days. I would like you there, not to stand in the back." Where would I stand? He was quiet for a moment, thinking it through with the honest deliberateness she had come to recognize as the best part of him. "Beside me, if you'll have it. The position is permanent, and the question behind it is the same." Wren's hand went to her chest without planning to the cord, the key beneath her dress. The lock does not care who holds the key, but she cared. She cared about him and his patient questions, and the way he sat across work tables, and the way he'd said being seen clearly and meant it about himself as much as her. "Yes," she said. Epilogue. 1 year later, Spring had finally agreed to stay in the Ashenvale Valley. The light through the palace windows was the uncomplicated gold of genuine morning, and it fell across the new wing of the archive without apology. Wren stood in the doorway of the expanded records room, 2 rooms knocked into one, re-floored in pale stone, lined with shelves she had helped design, holding a cup of tea gone slightly cold because she kept forgetting to drink it. She did not mind. She was reading. The Keeper of House Knowledge had become something more official in the 12 months since Pembury had pronounced his reservations. The title had been ratified by Valley Charter. The position now included 2 assistants, both young women from the Valley villages, one wolfless and brilliant and terrifying in her efficiency, the other a small brown wolf shifter who could read old script 3 times faster than anyone, and who had, last month, discovered a cache of original Ashenvale founding documents behind a false panel in the West Wing that no one had known existed. Wren had found the false panel by knocking. She had taught the young women to knock too. Her wolf was not large. She had shifted a dozen times now, in the practice yards, once in the cedar forests below the promontory at Calder's side, once simply in the palace garden at dusk when the feeling had come over her, and there was no reason not to. White and quiet and extremely stubborn, which Calder said matched her precisely, and not as a criticism. She heard him before she saw him, the particular cadence of his footstep, which she would know on any flagstone in any corridor. He came into the archive room with the unhurried certainty of a man who knew where he was going, and he stopped beside her, looked at what she was reading, and said nothing for a moment. He had the Valley Accord's first anniversary report under one arm. The border territories were rebuilding. 3 of the first new family households had sent cedar furniture to Duskspire as gifts, Valley cedar, the dark kind, from the old-growth floor. Wren had arranged for them to be placed in the rooms where the guests from those families would stay. "Still cold," Calder said, nodding at the tea. "I was reading." He took the cup from her hands, went to the small iron stove in the corner and warmed it. He handed it back. A domestic, quiet thing, the kind of thing that looks like nothing and is actually everything. Wren's hand went to her chest, to the cord. She pulled it free of her collar, and the small iron key rested in her palm. Dark and plain and worn to a shine from years of handling. She had told him about it in the 3rd week after the chest morning, sitting at the work table late, when the archive had gone quiet, and the truth had felt possible. He had asked to hold it. She had let him. He had held it the way people hold things they understand are important. She held it now in the early light and thought about her mother, who had known that a key belonged to its holder regardless of whether there was a door, because what the key meant was, you can open things. You have always been able to open things. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. The lock does not care who holds the key. But the person who holds the key That was the whole of it. That was the story. Not the mechanism, not the chest, not the experts, not even the seal. The person who knows her own worth quietly, in gray corridors, for years, until the moment the room goes still and the question is finally asked properly. Calder came to stand beside her. His hand found hers, and she turned the key over in their joined palms, and the morning came in gold and unhesitating through the archive windows. The young one, Dessa, found another sealed drawer in the west corridor, Wren said. What's in it? She doesn't know yet. She's going to knock on it first. Calder looked at her with the warm amber of a man who understood exactly what that meant. Good, he said. The valley was quiet below, and the light kept coming, and the key rested between their hands, small and iron and absolutely certain of itself, the way a thing is certain when it has always known its own worth and has only been waiting for the world to catch up. The lock does not care who holds the key. But the key had always known.